I saw a report recently that there was a 700% increase in deepfake attacks in the financial services sector alone. So, deepfake attacks, whether it's audio or video, are rising. And again, the place where we see these being used most effectively are with help desks. Maybe the name they use or the LinkedIn profile they use matches somebody who would typically be a US based IT worker, but they're actually not. So they're leveraging all of those AI based tools for filters and video deepfakes, etc.
Welcome to Software Snack Bites. I'm your host, Shomik Ghosh of Bold Start Ventures, and today we're excited to have Arnab Bose on the pod. Arnab is Chief Product Officer of Okta Platform and previously was VP Product at Salesforce. And in this episode, we're going to cover the evolution of identity in the age of AI, where, especially with agents, a lot of stuff to talk about here. So I guess, Arnab, first, can you describe what Okta does for whoever somehow doesn't know what you guys do, and then we can go from there.
Okta is pretty ubiquitous within people who work at large companies because we allow you to sign into all of your applications. So if you've used a single sign-on password or a MFA push notification, you may have used Okta in the past. It might have been branded as your company's single sign-on solution. That would be the most basic way to explain it. Yeah, and our vision as a company is to free everyone to safely use any technology. And when you think about the vision, there's a lot of different ways in which it manifests itself. But probably the most obvious way that people think about Okta would be, hey, like, how do I sign into my work applications?
Well, one of the things is, I think the founding history is like, the founder of Okta actually used to work at Salesforce, right? And so obviously some close connectivity between the two. This is more just like a cultural question just to start, is like, what's similar between Salesforce and Okta? Like, what's different? I assume there's a lot of people that have worked at both places, right? So, kind of just curious on some of your thoughts there.
From a company culture perspective, some things are shared in the sense that both Salesforce and Okta are SaaS companies, right? So, we pride ourselves in uptime, reliability, and trustworthiness from a customer's perspective. When I worked at Salesforce, there was a value called trust is our number one priority. We have very similar values at Okta in terms of love our customers, ensuring customer success, and ensuring uptime reliability for the sort of online cloud-based SaaS offerings. And we offer Salesforce at a similar perspective. I think there's some big differences because of the market we're in and the kinds of customers and use cases we support. We are an identity provider, which means when our customers bet on Okta as their single sign-on solution or their solution for identity management all up, we are part of their critical infrastructure. And if Okta is down, it means like pretty much every facet of the company is coming to a standstill. I think if you look at it from a Salesforce perspective, at least when I was there, it was primarily focused on customer relationship management and associated capabilities. Very, very important for businesses to have that be reliable in order to get their work done. So there's just a different perspective in terms of security products, identity products, the kinds of economic buyers we deal with, the types of questions we get that sort of is quite different between my time here and my time at Salesforce.
What was the biggest change for you though, going from that app layer to now just this security focus, right? It's like, things matter on both sides, but obviously when you're handling a lot of sensitive stuff, especially with SSO and across all of them, like that's a pretty crazy burden. So, what kind of was the primary change?
I think from a product strategy perspective, the big difference is if you're building an application, ensuring that there's customer value with every update, every new investment you make, that's like your primary focus, right? How can I make my customer more successful? How can I drive better outcomes, faster outcomes, things like that? All of that also holds for identity and security products, but the big difference is your economic buyer may not be in full control of being able to leverage all of the capabilities that you have. What I mean by that is, the IT or security team has to also convince their stakeholders like end users that security capability is not going to add too much friction, even though it drives better security outcomes. Or they have to convince the owners who might, the businesses might own certain apps, like the sales team might actually own their deployment of Salesforce, for example. and they have to convince those teams to go ahead and enable integration capabilities that actually light up the end-to-end identity security outcomes in that customer's environment. So it's a pretty interesting challenge being able to sort of provide that best of sort of breed capabilities across security and end user experience, as well as providing your champions, like the Okta champions within our customer base. We work very hard with them to provide them with hard data, enablement materials, ways to have conversations with their stakeholders so they can actually leverage the product to the fullest. It's quite interesting going from like an app layer to like something that is an enabling technology that connects to many apps. And it's both a challenge and an opportunity. The opportunity is most customers are still fairly early in their maturity model in terms of being able to fully secure identities end to end. So we have an opportunity to go help solve that. The complexity is like this sort of multi-tiered, multi-stakeholder approach.
That makes sense. I think one thing you just talked about there was like, obviously security first and foremost, but then you did talk about, the end user experience and innovating there. And like, I think a lot of times you can have security be the bottleneck for innovation, right? Because like, I mean, not all the enterprise, but a lot of the enterprise I talk to, like security around data with AI has been, something that has caused them to be a little bit slower to maybe adopt AI. So like kind of how do you balance that within Okta in terms of the product side, like that security focus, but then also layering on that innovation?
So as I said, like it's very important for us to ensure that not only are we providing security capabilities, we are helping our customers roll it out in a way that makes the end user experience better, or and the worst case scenario, not worse. A good example would be if you look at passwordless phishing resistant authenticators. These are way more secure than using password plus push or any other form of MFA. Okta has our solution, which is called Okta FastPass, that allows you to just sign into applications with Windows Hello or Touch ID or Face ID. Super, super secure. This is 3 times faster for the end user to log in with compared to traditional MFA, which involves a password plus push or something else. So it's a good example of security innovation that actually has a significantly better end user experience. You're less likely to forget your password because you never use it. There's a whole host of benefits to it. So we're obviously trying to push the envelope to try and go achieve outcomes like that. Your AI use case is very timely because a lot of customers are going through this mode of like, yes, we have to adopt AI technologies. That it's obvious that it's going to be a huge productivity boost for various functions, but how do we do this safely, securely, using data and sort of not creating new security holes? So again, over here, there are lots of opportunities for security products to both be enablers as well as reduce friction. So a contrast I would have is if you didn't have a security strategy around securing identity use cases for these AI products, you'll probably have to include some level of governance that is a people or process based effort to take a look at secrets or non-human identities being created by these AI projects. It'll be all very manual, it'll slow down rollout, and it'll be error prone. Whereas if you move to a model like what we are offering with our identity security posture management product, where there's it's a productized solution, it connects to your crown jewel applications with a couple of clicks, takes like approximately 5 to 10 minutes to set it up, and it proactively monitors for new non-human identities like API tokens or service accounts being created, provides you with stack ranked list of issues that are prioritized by severity, as well as prioritized against compliance frameworks like PCI or SOX or NIST. The job of the IT or security team gets massively simplified, and they're spending less time on toil and less time pushing back on business teams trying to make progress because they're like, okay, I've got my monitoring in place. It's going to tell me if a long-lived secret is being created, and I can proactively go and start vaulting it or auto-rotating it, improving my security policy versus posture versus having to implement this sort of manual process that is A, insecure, and B, extremely slow for my stakeholders. So again, like I think it's valid to say that there's a security versus end user experience to security versus speed trade-off. But as practitioners in the industry, our job is to go ahead and sort of tip that in favor of like, hey, you're becoming more secure and you're actually speeding up the business.
One of the things with passwordless is really interesting because like it's so much better when you use it, right? Like it is a game changer. It's more secure, everything like that. But like we still don't have, like we people are using it more and more every day. But there's tons of applications I log into from whatever companies that still don't have it. And I guess like what's the gating factor? Is it the fact that like those enterprises are still worried about like, for example, like my mom may not know how to use Face ID or something, like is that the gating factor? Is it something else? Like why aren't we just fully in a passwordless world? Because it's just so much more secure.
I think there's several factors to it. So one is like a positive note is if you take a look at Okta's businesses at work report that we published earlier this year, we take a look at actual activity within our customer base, and we're seeing a pretty massive uptake of phishing-resistant passwordless authentication factors like FastPass and WebAuthn. I think we saw almost a 300% increase year over year in terms of its adoption. So it is picking up. When I speak with customers, some of the issues that they're running into is around a variety of things, right? One is if you take a look at company issued laptops and devices, there is a curve that they're still on in terms of modernization. So some customers may be using older Windows machines that maybe don't have the camera hardware to support Windows Hello for Business. And then the cost of rolling out a separate YubiKey or other biometric authenticators is expensive for them. So that's an example. Another one is just figuring out how do you run an employee-facing campaign to go get employees to enroll in biometrics. So again, we've been doing a bunch of work to help customers out with telemetry, reporting, standard ways in which we have done those campaigns internally within Okta. But as you get into larger and larger customers with some of our customers have hundreds of thousands of employees. Reaching every single one of them to go ahead and make that happen is tricky. There are also some misconceptions that people have. Like some end users have a misconception that if you use Touch ID or Face ID to log into work, then maybe your employer now has your biometrics. And being in technology, that is not true because these are interfaces provided by Apple or Microsoft. The biometric data is only stored on device in a hardware protected enclave, and software application vendors never get access to it. But that's a hard thing to go explain, to an average person and get their trust. So again, how do we in the industry, how do leaders within IT and security teams at our customers, how do IT publications and podcasts kind of socialize the truth that, hey, there is actually a separation of duties here and you don't have to be concerned. So there's a variety of things like devices, diversity of like employee types, people maybe who don't have access to a single device, they're using shared devices, and then perceptions or misconceptions around biometrics.
That makes a lot of sense, and well, hopefully we can do our part with this podcast here. But before we get into like a lot of the fun stuff, I think that you guys are rolling out around AI. I just want to ask, like internally for your teams, right? What are you seeing the benefits of AI? And I guess like code gen is obviously the easiest one, right? So I'm sure everyone on your team is using some of the solutions and stuff like that. But like outside of that, right? Like are there meaningful impacts that you're seeing internally from AI?
Totally. So, I mean, you obviously touched on the topic that is most written about in terms of software and engineering, in terms of being able to be more efficient in terms of like writing or authoring code. I think there's some interesting nuances even within that. For example, there is a lot of cost in the software as a service ecosystem around updating and patching of binaries, right? Like, because we are running our products in the cloud doesn't mean the standard processes of software development go away. There's always like newer Java versions, there's newer versions of databases, things like that. Typically these migrations or updates on the infrastructure side for a SaaS product have a significant toil to developers. And that is a place where AI is really well suited. In fact, I saw a post by Andy Jassy a few months ago talking about how Amazon themselves saved like thousands of hours of dev time on a Java upgrade. So I think that's one where it's not necessarily new product generation, but a tax that engineering teams are paying that's being significantly reduced by by AI. The other aspect of it is testing for security defects or catching issues upfront. So various like security libraries have like known limitations. Like bcrypt has some known limitations. So if you're using that in a project, being able to use AI to sort of catch security issues is something that I'm seeing pick up quite a bit. So there's some like interesting nuances even within like software and code gen that I'm excited about. Above and beyond that, to answer your question, we are seeing AI being used by all functions within our company. So we use AI products for doing research on the product team. So being able to go ahead and say, okay, I want to take a look at identity verification and proofing tools as an example and get a good sense for which industries, which geographies, which segments, which existing vendors are important, what are their pros and cons, creating SWOT analysis. Again, like these are things we would have taken weeks to go do. It's really crazy how much faster it is to do with an AI tool. And again, like you can't trust it 100% because there are some errors, but at least you get a framework, you get a research plan, you get the basics, and then the work for the product manager or the business planning person analyst is much faster because then they're just going ahead and fact checking things versus having to build the full research plan or maybe having to go do a anonymous survey with there are various survey companies out there who get results for you upfront. Like you'll probably do that, then you're able to fine tune your thesis about what kind of product you want to build or where you want to partner or what you want to integrate with, and then you can be way more effective in terms of your next steps. Similarly, with like customer support, documentation, our Auth0 product has a really interesting capability called Auth0 Guide, where it's an AI based interface where we help people building on top of Auth0 get really sort of customized, specific deployment guidelines that's based off of our standard documentation and content we've created. So it's not like we had to go ahead and generate a ton more content, but it just makes it much faster for the builder to interact with it and get the answer that they need faster.
I appreciate the call out on AWS and Amazon because actually the guest right before this gets released talk is the director of agentic AI who actually shipped Amazon Q. So if anyone wants to learn more about that Java migration, listen to that previous episode. But one of the things I wanted to move into is I think one of the coolest things about Okta, right? You have the single sign-on experience. So you go in, you sign in, and boom, now you can go into any application and you're automatically authenticated in and you can start using it. But obviously that's not as easy as it looks to the end user, right? So what's the complexity that's happening behind? Is each time like are you having to match, is this identity correct? Is this token the right way? Like what is kind of the complexity that's happening behind the scenes? Just because I think it's something that, hasn't been talked about and it just seems so simple.
Right. So the way I'll zoom out of this is identity has become the final frontier that allows a good actor, like an employee or a customer, to access all resources, or a bad actor to access all resources. I think historically, if you go way back, you were able to protect access in a variety of different ways. Like you could say it was locked down to a physical building because it was a completely on-prem solution and was only available by the local Ethernet. To okay, you were only able to access it via the corporate network or from a corporate device, et cetera, et cetera. But as we've got cloud and SaaS-based services, people working from any device type, employees, contractors, business partners, all interacting and collaborating on projects, you cannot rely on any other frontier or any other perimeter other than identity. And so when we think about securing identities, it's no longer sufficient to think about securing the front door, securing the authentication itself. And there's a lot of interesting depth and detail I can go into about even the authentication step. But it's sort of opening up the aperture and thinking about protecting identities before an authentication has even happened, during authentication itself, and then after authentication has happened. So let me just explain this in a little bit more depth, and then we can cover like what do we do here. So why is it important to secure identities before an authentication has even happened? Well, if you look across all of your cloud products and applications, inside each application there is a set of like roles and levels of access that are set for your end users. So this is pretty interesting because it effectively means that something like AWS or GitHub or Office 365 is a directory of your end users as well. And it is possible for your end users to have direct access to those tools without going through your single sign-on provider. So we've spent a lot of time building out identity security posture management and identity governance to help you identify what level of access people have within these applications, as well as figuring out whether they have direct access to the applications that you as an IT or security team do not see. So, super important for customers to sort of have this perspective, because you could have partially offboarded users, you could have users who are bypassing your MFA, you could have users with elevated permissions that they don't need. How do you go ahead and really take control of that is like step one. So if you've gone ahead and identified all of the bypass issues, or even when something is going through your single sign-on provider, maybe Arnab doesn't need admin privileges to Salesforce because he's just a user now, right? So all of those things are things you need to correct before an authentication has even happened, because otherwise that's the backdoor that the bad actor will exploit. Or if they compromise one of your employees who has elevated privileges, they'll use the elevated privileges to create other accounts, and that'll be harder for you to detect. That's step one. Step two is during authentication. So we talked a little bit about getting to passwordless, phishing-resistant auth, and it's super important that all businesses and all end users get to phishing resistance, because it's pretty common knowledge now that it's very easy for bad actors to start sending you texts or emails with these links. I think what is getting more and more sophisticated is, with the use of Gen AI, how personalized and sophisticated these messages can get, right? So historically, it might have been pretty easy for you to understand that this message is not coming from your IT team or your manager or whatnot. It's going to get much harder going forward. So at the point of authentication, we are working on not just phishing resistance by default, but to combat what I just said, but also like looking at a variety of other ways in which you could have a belt and suspenders approach. So we can identify that the machine you're coming from is a corporate issued managed device. We can identify if the machine is healthy or not by integrating with endpoint protection tools like CrowdStrike. We can provide the IT teams with additional controls to check for things like, is the end user running a consumer VPN on that endpoint or not? So some of the North Korean fake IT worker attacks actually use this backdoor, right? They deploy this consumer grade VPN onto the company issued laptop, and then they use that consumer VPN to tunnel into the laptop from wherever they are. So these are the kinds of additional checks and balances that you want to have above and beyond phishing resistant authentication. And then another thing to consider from a point of authentication perspective is how to integrate with identity verification tools. So Okta integrates with Clear, Persona, and Encode today. We have a roadmap for being able to integrate with other providers as well. And the value that they bring is pretty interesting, because if somebody is resetting an authentication factor, either themselves or by calling into a help desk, that's a pretty big hole today, right? So even if you're getting to phishing resistant passwordless access, if you're able to convince a human being who's manning a help desk that they should reset your credentials, or they should send you a temporary password, that is now a place where, again, with deep fakes, phishing, etc., it's pretty easy to bypass security checks. So if you have an identity verification provider built in, then they're doing some really interesting things like liveness detection, deep fake detection, matching your face with a government issued ID by having direct integration with DMVs across states and things like that. So that's another way in which we can prevent a different kind of attack. And then the final step is, how do you protect identities after authentication? So what usually happens is, once a person is authenticated, they get a token, being very high level, and that they can use that token directly against SaaS services and cloud applications. And the identity provider is now no longer in the mix. So what happens if there's malware on your machine, or there's a networking attack that then goes ahead and scarfs up session cookies, and the bad actor is now replaying those session cookies from a different machine? At that point in time, you have an MFA bypass issue. You're not authenticating the user. And this attack is getting more and more common. I think I saw a report that said in 2023, across Fortune 1000 companies, over 1.9 billion session cookies were stolen by bad actors. Right. So at that point in time, even if you have the best protections in place for authentication, or you've done all of the due diligence on governance, you're still exposed. So we've been working on ways to go address this. We have a product called Identity Threat Protection with Okta AI. It leverages AI and models internally to detect a variety of things like Okta session cookie or session token theft, MFA push bombing attacks. It integrates via an open standard with a variety of security products like Google Chronicle, CrowdStrike, Palo Alto, Zscaler. And so the combination of these security signals help us recalc in near real time what an end user's identity security risk is. And if it gets elevated, then we can trigger inline real time actions like universal log out. So instead of single sign on, it's universal log out, and that destroys the session cookies. Again, if you zoom out a little bit, it's just like, okay, my interaction with my single sign-on provider is this like little login box, and I want it to go away as fast as possible. Like, how tricky could it actually be? Behind the scenes, it's actually this pretty complicated system of before authentication, checks and balances, getting down to least privilege. During authentication, not just like matching a password, but doing the biometric passwordless check, going super deep on the device, ensuring you're coming from a healthy known device. And then after authentication, it's running all of those checks continuously so that if something happens, we can really shorten the incident response time and protect your identity.
So there's a couple questions that came out from that. Like, one thing I just want to talk about is like nation state attacks, right? You guys obviously have, you're working with governments and enterprises and things like that. Like, is that something that is increasing in prevalence? Like, kind of over the years, is it kind of staying flat? Are we, like what's kind of the read of that? And I guess is that something that we should be more worried about in the future? I guess going forward.
I mean, I don't want to play all doom and gloom, but the facts are out there, right? Like the North Korean government has been able to run this remote IT worker campaign pretty aggressively, not just in North America, but I saw an update recently that they were running the same campaign in Europe as well. And you have to assume that that other state-backed actors are going to run similar campaigns, if not at the same scale, maybe even greater scale. So how do you react in that sort of new reality is up to you. But like our recommendation is, okay, we know these tactics and procedures. We are leveraging our Okta threat intelligence team and our the channels that we have to go ahead and communicate known issues as broadly and widely as possible. We post a bunch of this publicly, but then for Okta customers, they can actually go to a site that is called security.okta.com that's behind their own Okta login that provides way more detail about activity that we're seeing within our customer base that we won't be able to share publicly because it would reveal details that are sensitive. But that gives them a personalized report on, okay, here we are seeing a phishing campaign. It's coming from these specific like consumer VPNs. We believe the actor is XYZ or they're state sponsored. Here's how we recommend you protect against it, so on and so forth.
Phishing is obviously still, I think, I forget what it is. I think emails some crazy still amount, let alone text and obviously, websites as well. It's still one of the biggest attack vectors. And I guess my question is like, you said the attackers are getting better with Gen AI, right? My question though is like, is it still mostly text-based that you're seeing, or are you starting to see some of these like, kind of more deep fake things like video, audio? Are you seeing like images where, it's superimposed and you're clicking on something, like how much of those new form factors are becoming a thing versus still they're just really good at text now?
I saw a report recently that there was a 700% increase in deepfake attacks in the financial services sector alone. So deepfake attacks, whether it's audio or video, are rising. And again, the place where we see these being used most effectively are with help desks, right? So if you can get a recording of a employee at a company, and you're able to sort of create an audio deepfake of them, and you can start, and or you find out the IT help desk contact number, that would be a uh, a chain of tactics that would make sense, right? So the 700% number is like third party research, and that was interesting. The other thing I can call out is, again, going back to the North Korean government's fake IT worker campaign. They are using AI based filters on Zoom and other video conferencing tools. So when they join your company, it's harder for you to detect that they're maybe not dialing in from their US based location, or maybe the name they use or the LinkedIn profile they use matches somebody who would typically be a US based IT worker, but they're actually not. So they're leveraging all of those AI based tools for filters and video deepfakes, etc. So those are real data points that that hopefully paint the picture.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think there's the fascinating thing is there's more and more research coming out. I think I can put it in the show notes, but I think there's something called perceptual hashing that kind of helps to figure that out. I'm sure you guys are using it, Okta, or thinking about using it or whatever. And so yeah, it's the good thing is as the attackers get more sophisticated, so are the defenders as well. So we're thankful for the work you guys are doing. One of the big things that of course is coming up right now is everyone's talking about agents and how those will be deployed. Obviously, agents are a new form of identity in this fact pattern, especially if like they're using model context protocol to start calling tools like. How does that work? Are you going to SSO your agent into your tool base and then and then go from there? Like, it's kind of a broad question that have specifics, but like, how are you at Okta thinking about agentic identities and kind of controlling that as a a potential attack vector?
A great question. We were excited about several things. One is, as I mentioned, like AI is really supercharging the way in which we work. So it's really important for us to, as an industry, to ensure that AI can be rolled out as safely as possible. When we speak specifically about AI agents, the difference between an AI agent and, let's say, like a Copilot style product is that the agent is non-deterministic and it is accessing multiple resources at the same time, possibly even asynchronously, and taking action on behalf of a user, versus simply providing like guidance in the context of a product that's shrink wrapped. So that agent is behaving a lot more like a human being. And I love the fact that you called it out yourself. Like, you need to like SSO the agent. You need to have an inventory of all your agents. You might even need to do like lifecycle management for agents, right? Maybe there's a project that spins up and after some time it's no longer valuable, or you want to shut it down. It's almost like an employee kind of changing job titles or roles, or leaving the company, and you have to like shut down their access. So along those lines, like, we are excited about Model Context Protocol because that creates a standard that companies can use to have their agents interact with other resources or with other agents. But one of the issues that Aaron on my team noticed when MCP was first brought out is the concept of authorization servers or standard identity security protections like OAuth were not baked into MCP at that time. He's been working with the community on how do we go ahead and ensure that OAuth concepts for identity security can get baked into MCP, and what is our perspective going forward to like ensure that that level of identity security is available as two AI agents or an AI agent and a MCP resource communicate. That, I think, is like step one, because again, OAuth actually is a pretty good standard for service communication that ensures you're using short-lived tokens. And there's been improvements over the years like Depop that ensure that the token is being played from a known device and it's not being replayed somewhere else. So there's a whole host of like security advantages you get just by fixing OAuth and MCP. And a lot of those enhancements in terms of fixing OAuth and MCP would probably be live and part of the latest spec. The step beyond this, though, is also something we've been working on as Okta. And so, one of the things that we've been thinking a bit about is how do we get MCP enterprise ready? So, again, like, Aaron's been working on this, but one challenge with simply using OAuth is, as an IT or security team, how do you glean complete information about all of the service to service integrations that are happening within your ecosystem? Because OAuth grants can happen between two different services, And unless you're introspecting every service or you're getting alerts, etc., you are not like directly in the middle granting that access. So something we've been working on as Okta is a new grant type for OAuth, which is called a cross-app authorization grant. And what that means is it allows identity providers to actually be in the middle of the service-to-service integration. So they do the cross-app authorization grant. So for example, if an AI agent wants to read data from Confluence and Google Drive and have access to Slack for messages and maybe ServiceNow for creating tickets, instead of that being four different service-to-service connections, the AI agent would call into an identity provider, do basically a describe call to say, hey, what services am I allowed to connect to? And the identity provider can have policies set by the IT or security admin that says these grants are allowed and discoverable. And so that allows you to set like almost like a governance policy for rolling out these service to service integrations going forward. So think about like all of the things I said about securing identities before, during, and after authentication. We want to secure AI identities before, during, and after authentication as well. So with these two changes in place where OAuth is fixed in MCP and there is a new grant type for cross-app authorization, the world you can get to is before authentication has even happened, you can ensure that your AI agents are getting the right level of OAuth scopes that you approve and they aren't over permissioned. During authentication, they're using OAuth based access, so it's short-lived, it's depop, etc. And post authentication, again, because it's depop, it means that it shouldn't be something that a bad actor can steal and replay from a different machine. And then B, because you're controlling the cross app grant through the identity provider, and it's not like service to service, you as the customer have the ability to go in and terminate these things as well. So you can run recertification campaigns, you can offboard agents, and so on and so forth. So that's the future we are pushing for. We hope to have all the protocols in place this year, and then it's a question of driving up adoption of these grant types and usage within our customer base.
Yeah, it's fascinating that you're talking about that. Like, so I think fine grained auth is going to be like a huge thing for agentic adoption, right? So we can kind of control what they can be used and understand. But I guess my question is does then that require, like, in that world, if that cross app certification is happening, does it require like a policy or like a governance layer on top of each agent, so that you are saying that, hey, you are a data agent, so that means you get access to data tools, right? You are a security agent, you get access to security. Like, what's broadly, how do you envision that playing out?
It's very similar to how you have access control rules for human beings. So like within an organization, you'll probably classify your applications into high, medium, or low assurance apps. And then you classify your end users into various groups. So this is a group of end users who are on the engineering or product team, and this is a group of end users who are in San Francisco. And so you get to write policies that either are unique, like all engineers get access to low assurance applications, or all engineers in San Francisco get access to something. So like you can write policies like that are combos. So you'll have a similar world with AI agents and resources, right? So AI agents will be modeled like end users. Presumably, you can put them into like various groups and things like that. You can put applications into various groups, and then you can have like these authorization policies, which are like, for this collection, I want to grant them this standard policy that I have for low assurance resources, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Right. So again, we haven't built all of this as yet because this is still early days, but from a computer science and industry fundamentals, all of the concepts exist. So there's ways to scale this out so you don't end up with, like a bespoke policy for each agent and each resource. Like you could go ahead and create these groupings and abstractions.
Got it. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. What do you think about like the scope of this though? Like, is it, right now it's Shomik and Arnab talking, right? Right. But like presumably we could have an agent going and doing work, listening to the conversation, like picking things up, surfacing things, whatever. Are we going to have, for each employee, are you talking like 5 agents, 10, 100? Like, is no one knows, but like, what's your best guess, I guess, of like how big you think this gets?
This is pure speculation. I have no idea like how many agents per employee we'll end up with. But I think ignoring the total number, the kinds of use cases are quite unbounded. Right. So maybe you'll have like one or two agents that can cover tens of use cases, and therefore you don't need that many agents.
Hmm.
But I think the use cases are quite unbounded. Like you could have something very basic, like it's giving you meeting notes. You can sort of have something more complicated that takes the action items and actually creates tickets for them. It creates the action items and actually follows up on them instead of creating tickets by like sending the Slack notifications for internal follow-ups or whatnot. It doesn't just do it a human in the loop, it actually goes in and closes the loop. So I'm pretty excited about that. I think that's kind of cool. You'd probably need to have some guardrails because again, these are probabilistic things, right?
Yeah.
So the things that seem to work really well is like, hey, it's guidance, and it's guidance in a scoped enough way where a human being can review it and then can move it on to the next step. It might get, I mean, I'm sure it's going to get better over time, but in the next 12 to 18 months, having the frameworks in place where you can do the review and you can sort of authorize the action are pretty important. Otherwise, I think it'll be difficult for people to feel confident that they can just let it rip. But that's where my head is at, which is I think the use cases are quite unbounded, and each use case requires some level of identity management, right? Like it requires authorization of that action. Is that action allowed or not? Some way to audit it, some way to revoke it. And so that's exciting from my perspective, being where I'm at in the stack.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Last two questions for me. One is like, we AI tools are almost bringing back. You remember, like back in it was like 2020, I guess, was like when you had this whole bring your own tools to work sort of craze, right? And it made sense because you just need to be effective at home and stuff like that. Now with AI, right, you're having this concept where like someone's really good at using Perplexity versus ChatGPT, and that helps them in their workflow and so on and so forth. And so you almost might have this explosion of tools again. And so I guess like for the CISOs that listen to this and for the IT teams and stuff like that, like, is shadow IT just like something they're going to be dealing with, and like it is what it is, and you just gotta swallow it, or kind of I guess how do you view that future, and I guess what do you think from the Okta side you guys are doing to sort of be able to discover those assets and help folks out?
I think security teams are going to have to be more flexible in terms of what tools they allow the business to use and how fast they can approve them. Because if they start slowing that down, then their business might suffer, right? Because there could be like designers could have a particular use case that dramatically changes their flow. And if you hold them back from being able to use it, your competitors could go, leverage that tool to out accelerate you. So that's the pressure that people are going to be under. And it's similar to the bring your own tool use case you brought up for in 2020, right? Like if you were preventing those from being adopted, then given that there was a lockdown and everybody was working from home, maybe your business was suffering. So that's the reality. Now, it's not all bad from a security perspective because we have far more sophisticated tools now for detecting these inbound connections and identities within various products. So I'll go back to like identity security posture management. The depth of capabilities we have in terms of identifying when one of these connections is set up and what kind of actions are being taken is really high, right? So for your crown jewel resources, which have real corporate data in them, being able to identify that these connections are being set up from an identity perspective, that's great. There are also obviously like other tools you can use to detect improper use of AI products. Like if somebody is using a commercial version of ChatGPT or Perplexity that doesn't allow you to have insight into their queries, or if they're uploading corporate data outside of identity, there are enough networking tools that will help you sort of get insight into it and hopefully bat people down into proof tools. There's also a place where like having a faster velocity of approved tools really helps you, right? Like if you think you're being more secure by not approving tools, you're probably shooting yourself in the foot, right? Because your
They're going
end
to use it
users are going
anyway.
to work
Yeah.
around that and they're going to start using these consumer tools and you'll not have any insight into them at all. So I think the combination of Things like identity posture management, ability to do the cross-app authorization grant. These are all things that will give security leaders more confidence in rolling out corporate approved flows faster, and that is going to help help get people sort of in line and prevent them from using these workarounds.
That makes sense. Yeah.
People want to do the right thing, right? Like
Yeah.
most employees don't want to go, don't want to violate corporate policy. They'll end up doing it if it's like required to get their job done. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember we were blocked from using Slack at a previous organization.
Yeah.
We all just ended up using it because we were just like, it's still the easiest way to do it, right? So I think that velocity is something that makes a lot of sense for security and IT teams to think about. So I guess anything that you'd like to address on the Okta side that we didn't cover before we wrap things up?
No, I think we covered a lot. There's also a lot of really interesting things we're seeing on the consumer side that maybe we didn't talk about. So we're seeing some pretty good adoption of passkeys. That's a really great way for consumers to get to phishing-resistant passwords authentication for themselves, like not just for enterprise use cases. I highly encourage any consumer sites out there to see what can they do to go ahead and switch over to passkeys from usernames and passwords. I think we are also seeing some really good progress in terms of end users or consumers having access to digital identities. So the new real ID requirement at airports, I hope is going to spur more people to have digital identities. I was at an airport recently and I saw the TSA was actually saying we accept digital IDs, you should go get one. So the government is actually pushing for this. This is very helpful in the age of AI in the reverse sense, as in, I think there'll be more and more use cases where we will want higher assurance that the person is a human being and not an AI agent for consumer use cases. So passkeys and getting like universal digital identities or some form of a digital identity that you can trust, that adoption is going to spur another wave of innovation and it'll unlock more use cases.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that's where we go. I mean, in India, certainly they do a lot of really cool things with having that, and hopefully we can get there in the U.S. But I think it's going to take a little bit more adoption cycles to get there. But it's a bright future if we can get there. So Arnab, thank you so much for the time. It was great chatting, and thanks for going into the weed on some of these things. I think it's a really exciting vision that you guys have, and frankly, a challenging one too, in the sense of like, we do think that these identities are going to start exploding, right? Because it's not going to just be me and you, but who knows how many agents could be interacting while this is going on. So I'm really excited for what you guys will do in the future for customers to help secure that.
Totally. Thank you for having me, Shomik. It was really great chatting with you.